Good morning. I thought I didn't have anything to talk about, but it turns out I do. That bit about doing nerdy stuff and getting stuff for cheap or making money or whatever, how to profit from it. That's still in the forefront of my thinking, and just it does help that I'm cheap. It's like if I can spend extra money on something, or I can spend less and like make it my own, make it a DIY project of some kind, like, I'm interested. Definitely. Not only am I saving money, I'm having fun doing it. That is a excuse me. That was quick. That is a personality trait, though. That's something that, based on your interests and what you, I guess, what you like to do with your free time. I like the puzzle. I like troubleshooting hardware. It has always been a thing that I do. All the way back to electrocuting myself when I was like 15 or something like that. I don't know what this is or how it works, but I'll take it apart and look at it. Good times. So if you're not really down for puzzles, which I don't know if you're following this channel because you aren't down for puzzles, you're like, boo, I hate figuring stuff out, yuck. I mean, you might as well profit from it. You can sit at home and make a puzzle, put a puzzle together on a table, and then maybe hang it up on the wall and look at it every once in a while. Or you could buy a puzzle for parts on eBay and try and fix it up. And then have some cool kit when you're done. So I'm thinking about this, and I was reminded of the Raspberry Raspberry Pi stuff. I'm gonna complain about Raspberry Pi. Well, as much as I technically complain about them, which is forget what the phrase is. Damned praise or something like that. It's mostly good. It's mostly good. It's more than mostly good, but it's still just annoying sometimes. So I've been using I've got a extra Raspberry Pi 400, and I've been using that as a television computer. And the kids, previously it was running RetroPie, and that works pretty good. I don't have a lot of control over RetroPie. It's kind of annoying, but it's also, it's a compromise. RetroPie is always a compromise. It's especially RetroPie on or an actual Raspberry Pi, because you have to, you're planning around the hardware, and you've got this ARM HF chipset that you're dealing with, and it's different. So there's not a lot of support for it. So things are slow, and that's kind of okay. But it's always just a little slower than I can keep from complaining about. A little slower than I can bother with. Just slow enough to make me upset. But once it works, it's great. It's fine. But it's that initial slowness. Right. So, so it ran RetroPie, and it did pretty good. It had some issues. It needed an update or something, but I believe what happened is we didn't use it for a while. So it was loaded with the appropriate Raspberry Pi operating system. I think at that point it was still called Raspbian. And whatever RetroPie distro type stuff is on there. Optimized, works pretty good. And then I wanted to test out the Raspberry Pi yeah, it's called Raspberry Pi OS 64, and I talked about this a while ago. So I installed the Raspberry Pi OS 64, and it browses well, it streams YouTube well. I can put on ad block stuff and make it a much cleaner experience, cleaner internet experience, cleaner streaming experience. I'm like, okay, this is good. And that was pretty much all it was for. And I honestly, I just kind of forgot about it. I forgot that it was a 64-bit OS, and that it was somewhat early in the adoption process. And by early, I mean like year and a half, 2 years old. This is Raspberry Pi we're talking about. So the kids had some rips they wanted, and I put the rips on there, and they were able to watch those there. There's a little bit of screen tearing I can notice, but kids don't care. They're fine. But, good enough. Actually, probably pretty all right, pretty good at those things. And the kids were asking about playing the 64, like Zelda emulators and stuff like that for 64, N64. I was like, oh yeah, the RetroPie card, I'll go grab that. So I plugged in the RetroPie card, and it didn't boot up. It said it did. The hardware was incompatible. The start ELF file does not match. I was like, well, that's kind of weird. What happened there? And what happened was, when I updated to 64, I applied a hardware update, or I guess a firmware update, some kind of update to the Raspberry Pi 400. And after that, it's not compatible with the previous versions. So now I've got a RetroPie 32-bit image that has the save files and stuff like that, and all the configuration stuff on it. And that, yeah. And that one needs a fresh flash of RetroPie. So I need to like pull off all the things that are on it, all the config stuff that's on it that took me a while to set up, and then I need to put a fresh Raspberry Pi or RetroPie image on it, and then put all my config stuff back on it, which should be okay. But I was like, yeah, I've got this operating system that's right now, it doesn't have a RetroPie interface, but the kids are learning about typing and navigating folder structures and clicking and dragging and navigating menus and stuff like that for the operating system. So why not just install Mupen 64? And you can't because it's a 64-bit OS. There's dependencies that are 32-bit, and they don't apply to it for this RetroPie, or for this Raspberry Pi version. Plus, it's the Raspberry Pi 400, which is slightly different than the original 4. So, I've also got that working against me. So, this was a solid intro, and might still have normal use. It's still functional. It'll still browse. It still streams really well, and you can watch full-size video. It's good, but it's just not good for everything. You're getting. I guess that's the main thing. It's not a generalized computing experience. It is quite literally specialized, and that specialness will go away over time. Maybe in 3 to 5 years, all those packages will begin to exist. There's probably like little fiddly ways to get it to run, but I'm just not interested right now. It's not that important. So we're back in this loop again, and it just makes me want to get a regular x86 CPU and regular Linux operating system, and just say, here, ta-da. And with a, this is what I'm doing. I'm just pushing it out of its comfort zone. This is not something that it's not something that I should be doing. And that's probably the truth of the situation. I'm taking the Raspberry Pi, which is a purpose-built device for, moderate computing, introduction stuff. It's a $35 computer. It's not so much that now, but that's kind of the point. Is it was made to be this simplified computing experience to introduce people to this stuff, and it is, I don't know. It's either stretching too far or I'm stretching it too far, or a little bit of both. That's the thing. Like, you got these Raspberry Pis, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna have a full generalized computing experience. If I want to do X, Y, or Z, like the sky's the limit. Within the speed of the CPU. Well, not really. Within the speed of the CPU, within the amount of RAM that it has available to it, and within the chip architecture, which is going to limit how many libraries are available to it, and within whether or not you run at 64 or 32-bit, which severely limits the amount of libraries that are available to it. I could probably flip it to 32-bit, have a more generalized computing experience that is less fast, and that might be a good idea. I just really like the 64-bit OS. I still use it at work for development stuff, and in that capacity it works just fine. It works great. Simple stuff, and all the developer tools are pretty agnostic to whatever it's running on. It's also native to that, so like I'm messing around with the Pico stuff. That's all Raspberry Pi, so it's all supported. But it's still just like I'm pushing it out of its comfort zone, which is kind of what I do with hardware. So maybe this is normal.